we are in the throes of deadlines and you name it. So I thought we'd start and just everybody can introduce themselves and tell me. Carolyn, you can start because you already told me, but why don't you go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're from and the type of village you are, if you're open or developing or what.
Okay, my name is Carolyn Dahl, and I am a board member with a developing village in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. We are the point of pulling together our business plan and talking to others in our community, and with hoping that we could actually launch sometime in the spring. Our organization will be called Home in Place.
I think you muted yourself.
I am. Want to go ahead, Jack, and tell us about yourself?
Well, I'm involved with a village here called North County, which is just really beginning, and so that's the closest association to the village movement per se.
Mm-hmm.
The village was really launched with support from St. Paul Senior Communities in San Diego. I'm north of San Diego. But I'm also working on a virtual approach called Action Aging, and there's a group of us who are trying to put together something that could provide mutual support. It obviously wouldn't be volunteers giving local transportation, but for social services, socialization, bereavement support, loss, all of that.
Okay, great. And then we have Jerry.
Yeah, hi Barbara and everyone else. I'm Jerry Caraval. I'm the chairman of the board of Northwest Neighbors Network. We are an open village. We launched last February, and we have somewhere between 21 and 22 members. We are growing, and
good.
We're feeling very good about what's happening. We kind of launched with fewer members than we should have, but we just had this feeling that if we didn't get started, it just wasn't going to happen. So we launched in February, and none of us has regretted it since. It was a good move.
Good.
Where are you located, Jerry?
I'm sorry. I am in a little place called Shoreline, Washington, right outside Seattle, and we have an area of small towns in King and Snohomish County, just to the north of us, that we want to cover, and so that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Right. And then Roger. You're on mute. Well, Roger's on, but he's on mute. So we'll start, and I usually open it up. Down below, there's a little chat button. If you don't have any form of communication, or you can't communicate through your computer, you can do the chat, and I'll monitor it and give the questions as they come in. But I usually open it up, and before I do my like yada yada yada, ask if anybody has any particular questions they need. This whole forum is about mentoring and how we can help villages, whether it's developing or new problems or sorting out, different things. It's helpful to just have this, forum for people to stage the questions. So I would like to open it up and see if anybody has a pertinent question to ask.
Well, I can say that I'm really just here mostly to listen and learn. the difficulties are finding time to do everything that presents itself, and to find people who are willing to pitch in and help. So that becomes a challenge. But so I thought I'd listen, hear how everybody else is doing it and how they're succeeding and what works.
You're referencing, just getting started and getting people to, have a vested interest in the movement or the model within your community?
Yeah, well, one challenge we had was we had 5 board members and 2 decided to become emeritus because, that sort of problem. So it's really hard to get off the ground.
Right. Well, I ran a village for 8 years, so I have a little bit of a background in running a village and the startup. I will tell you that it does take a core group of people to really get organized and dedicated, because 1 or 2 people just can't handle the volume of information you're looking for. So going to different, community center or getting something, go to your local senior center or area agency on aging and ask them to host a forum. A lot of villages utilize libraries because that's a good meeting place for people to go and talk about the needs in the community, what support services people need, and then, get people interested in helping further it, whether they are on, looking for volunteers or on the, health committee or the budget committee, or, I heard a village recently call them teams and not committees. So it's an interesting slant, not just, committee work, but team, the team that does the volunteers, the team that organizes programs. So anybody else have any contribution?
Well, the one thing that this bothered me, of course, when we first started, and one of the most exasperating problems was you'd find people who were very excited and just gung-ho and everything, and then they would just disappear. I mean, literally disappear. They would stop coming to the meetings and whatever without telling anybody where they were or whatever. And we went through that for a couple of years. And eventually, my comment here is to encourage this person. Eventually, you will get that 1 or 2 people who are as excited as you are. Mm-hmm. And then things will start to move. But it does take a while to get to that point.
I think that's our hope. So that's kind of what we expect will happen. I think you gave me an idea, though, because we've been meeting in a community room at a homeowner's, and I think the idea of meeting at a senior center might actually draw more people. So that's a very good idea.
Do you do presentations, Charlie?
Well, we haven't really gotten that far, so we're really just kind of, that's why I say I'm here to listen. So you've already given me a lot of thoughts.
Well, Barbara, correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the things that we did to get things started was to do presentations as to what the village movement was about and what our village was about. And it took a lot of those, but you do have to get out and tell people who you are. And the more of that you do, the better off you are.
That's very true, Jerry. We and I do a lot of presentations. Like Jack, you're very versed in Zoom, but I just did one at a local library, and they streamed me in, and we had a conversation, and I showed them, things that the movement does. I have the whole elevator speech all lined up, and tell people what the village model is and how it's evolved, and how your community can embrace, the resources the village can offer. So it
Well,
is.
that's very helpful. I appreciate that.
And we also, we do, and if it's available, I mean, just email me. We have this thing, it's a one pager, basically. We call it the one pager. But it's a great document. It's a back, one page, front and back, and it has, what the village does and what, the model is and how it's transpired and how it gives the community support services. It's a great tool for marketing, obviously, but getting the conversation, like Jerry said, getting the conversation started. The other thing that I have to tell you, that with my village, we got a local politician. I lived in Northern Virginia for 30 years until I moved back up here. We had a county supervisor who really embraced the whole concept, and he held a town hall meeting. It was great. We know that there's this mayor in Bexley, Ohio. He really embraced the whole thing. They've got more of an intergenerational village going, but he really wanted that for his community. And Bexley's a small suburb of Columbus, and he got a newsletter out in their water bills. I thought that was ingenious. I thought it was like the best. And so getting the word out, getting people to partner with you to, really enhance, your movement, your model, your community village is good. Thanks, Jerry.
Yeah, that's very helpful. And I apologize. I took the video down because it's lunchtime here on the West Coast, and
No problem.
I don't want us to be chewing.
Carolyn, did you have a question?
Well, as I listen to others talk about it, we are, as I said, in the phase of putting together a business plan, and we've just worked on getting a specific first-year budget. And some of the things that, keep me up at night, so to speak, are, will we find people who think it's a great idea and say, but I'm not ready for that yet? How do you engage people before they, quote, ready for the full complement of services?
That would be called, that'd be called a volunteer.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So you get, okay.
Because, people like the village movement, and they either need the services or want the services, or they want the services to be there when it comes time when they need them. So it is engaging a community at whole. And I will tell you that the baby boomers, the younger seniors, they may not need the services now, but they look to have some personal fulfillment. And so that's where you're going to garner a lot of your volunteers.
So it's really as much about the volunteers as the
members.
As those, the members. And do you find there's a great deal of overlap between volunteers and members?
Sometimes it just depends on the
membership.
Yeah.
Somewhere, one of the villages I saw had they actually, and maybe this is common, they called members individuals who belong but weren't receiving services, and members plus were those that were actually receiving transportation and home help with everyday activities and things like that.
Well, there's a lot of terms out there. There are villages that have like the full membership, like you said, but then some of them have social memberships, or my old village called it the friend of the village, where they could join as an associate member, a friend, but not receive services from volunteers. A lot of them were the volunteers. But again, it's convincing the community that this is something that's going to be good for the community, that you're going to, support aging in place, and we know successfully that it's working. many younger seniors are looking for social programs too. You know, they want a little bit more organized programs or, you know, companionship. So it really helps with, you know, the loneliness factor, especially with those that are single.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
One other thing we think about, we've tried to get a handle on is how many members we might expect in the first year, and to try to find villages. We're not in a large metropolitan area. We're in a community of a couple 100,000, with maybe some other rural counties surrounding that, but not one that's attached to a larger metropolitan area. We've been told that if we had 30 members in the first year, we'd be doing good. What would be your reaction to that?
You know, it's interesting. My village opened with 60 people, and
what?
and it blossomed to about 180, and it sustains about 180 members. But it really just depends, again, on your community base. I mean, my demographic was larger. I mean, it was a bigger.
Yeah.
You know, we encompassed. You know, we were suburban, and again, you have to look at. You know, I would say 30 people joining is a great start because they get a friend and they bring a friend the next year, and you double to 60. Or, but we were more heavily concentrated in a suburban area. So, and there were. The age demographic was was an incentive for people to join the village movement. Transportation was the biggest issue and still is, continues to be. Jerry, you had a question.
Well, I had a comment that actually. But I'm thinking more along the lines of what you're saying there. A lot of times, if you can get social work, we have got social workers who tell people about us, and they come with a sort of a bias towards signing up because they trust their social worker, and that is a real help. I just talked to one of those the other day. Now, if I'd had a pen, she would have signed up because her social worker explained everything about it. Yeah, and she was just all ready to go.
Jerry, how many members did your village start with?
Well, when we launched, our mentor said we should have at least 15, and we had under that. I can't remember how many.
Oh, okay.
About maybe 10. As I said, we just somehow, I don't know whether you've ever had that feeling that something needs to be done and you just have to do it regardless of the risk. And that was the way we felt. And so we launched. Now we've got about 22 members, social and service members. And that's been within the last, since February. We've gotten, 10, 12 new members since February. So we're not growing as fast as we like, but we're growing steadily, and that's a help. One of the things I was going to say is it's kind of interesting. Luck plays such a big part in this. One day, a friend, one of our people who's been interested in this, said, "Well, my daughter would be willing to help." And of course, when she told her daughter said those famous words, "Mother," and in spite of that, she really took it over. And if it hadn't been for her, we would not be where we are today, because she was one of these kind of people that just read every document and all of that kind of thing. And now other people can do what she was doing. But at that time, she was exactly what we needed. So sometimes It's just a piece of luck you get that right individual.
Yeah, it's true. Yes. Good
And
point.
so, if I could kind of continue that, the startup question, then how are you funding yourself while you're developing membership base?
We are funding ourselves through the memberships. We've had some donations. There have been people who have been willing to give. We are looking for grants. Actually, in this part of the neck of the woods, we passed a Veterans Human Services levy, which actually Veterans Seniors and Human Services levy. And there are going to be some grants coming from that will help virtual villages. Now, unfortunately, that's not until 2020, but there's supposed to be, well, there's about $300,000 in there, and divided among 6 villages, that's a good piece of money if we can get a chunk of that. And we are looking for other types of grants as we can find them. But right now, with the donations we've had and the memberships we've had, we are doing fairly well. We're good for some time.
Do you have a paid staff person?
No.
Mm-hmm.
We are all volunteer. That is something that, everybody says, well, you're executive director, this type of thing. I don't know what you think about it, Barbara. I ask you. I would say that if you can get along without that, you're better off, because we have a village up there in Bellingham. I think it's called Bellingham at Home. You're probably familiar with it, Barbara.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They got an executive director and discovered they couldn't afford it. Mm-hmm. So they had to retrench. And so we're not going to do anything like that until we are absolutely sure that we need one and can afford one.
Yeah, and a lot of villages, I mean, like my village, I wasn't the original executive director. My village hired somebody part-time, very part-time, like 25 hours a week, knew what their budget was. They had dues paying, members and whatnot. And it wasn't until after the first year where they projected where they would be and staffing wise. So it goes in line, and you're right, Jerry, with your strategic plan and your budgets. And don't, a lot of villages jump in and, offer, reduced memberships, for low income folks, and without having the strategic plan in place to cover those costs, if you are paying, have a dues paying. So a lot is your business plan. A lot depends on, how you outline, your financials, and how you grow. And I'm of the opinion of being very conservative, with growth patterns, because it does take a little bit of time. It does take that outreach. And I do love the fact that the social workers are involved, because they're the ones that are going to be your referral source. It just really depends on each village and how they, I'm actually putting together numbers as far as staffing for the conference. So you'll be very interested. These are numbers that are self-reported by our villages. So, and I will tell you that it's about even-handed between no FTEs and less than 1 FTEs are about the same amount. About just a little under 30% of villages have that combination. So, like Jerry said, if you can, do without and have a coordinator, a volunteer coordinator, and share it until you get your feet on, on the ground, that's good.
Well, and then there's people like Dick Elkins, and those are all, he's got an all-volunteer group there. I don't think they've ever had an executive director.
No, they have a call manager. I forget. Dick's not on the conversation today, but they do have a system in place, and they share a phone, and it works for that village. And that's the beauty of these villages, is everyone is unique in how they handle their service requests, and who they have, if they use a software platform, if they're using it, or if they create their own, whatever makes that successful village in that community. We strive to give a blueprint, but there's no right or wrong answer, So Roger's on. Have problems with the video before?
Yeah, no kidding. I couldn't get anything to work, and suddenly it did. And so I am totally catching up, and I'll just catch the very end of it. So I'm not sure where you've been, but I was attracted to this because of the mentor. And the villages, to me, in Portland, Oregon, were started with the hub concept. And I teach neuroscience at the college, the aging mind, so 50 and above. And I spoke at Baltimore and did a presentation on loneliness. And then I also went by Zoom into San Diego. And I'm not going to be able to get to Chicago to present anything, but we're looking at ways that brain science and brain health as a topic can somehow brand villages as they emerge in the public concept of whatever city, town they might be, building up that knowledge base of people who ask the question, what is the village and how are they getting started? And we're using a couple of models to brand the village as outreach and have a topic that people come for the topic, but then attach that to the village in a longer frame. And so we work with brain science and how to both help marketing and also educate the world on what non-pharmaceutical interventions can help prevent that cognitive slide. So it's having that as a tool that certain villages could potentially come into both the medical providers as well as the senior centers and present a topic that seems to be quite attractive right now.
Interesting.
Roger, I can never remember the name of that organization you have down there. Our corporate secretary went and visited you guys. What do they call that hub that you have?
Gosh, I can't remember. I have to take a memory class someday. The name of our company is the Villages in Portland, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, which is the ones I...
So the main hub is Villages Northwest.
That's it, exactly.
And then you have Villages, PDX, and oh, now you're making me think of, there's 8 or 9 of them.
Yeah, they're all working together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was Villages Northwest, but I never can remember that name. But our corporate secretary was quite impressed with the setup they have down there.
Yeah, they have a lot of momentum, and the one thing that I see is that all the villages, and I think I heard someone just as I finally got geared up to go, talk about how they're all different. They're all, whether it's somebody who has enough funding to actually have a paid staff member to at least answer the phone, and the others that are driven, those passionate individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to find if there's a way to get the information to those villages about brain science as being something that can attract everyone, because it's the only thing that we found that everybody seems to be afraid of. And if we can flip that to being confident things that can be done, that's why education works.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. Do you work at all with Gary Small?
Years ago, Gary Small started off with his first memory Bible book, and we haven't worked directly with him. He's at UCLA. He's going a little bit different way than what we've gone for about 2 decades. Ours is totally education, and now it's education along with coaching to make sure that you have someone actually know what they're doing, but Gary's work with his wife has always been looked at as something that is really affecting a lot of people, but he's not, I don't think his programs are nationwide as much as UCLA. Have you worked with Gary before?
He does franchise a memory class, but I don't think it was handled well. Are you a physician yourself?
No, I'm not. In fact, one of the things that we covet is that we don't do the research, although I have one clinical trial back in the early 2000s that I co-authored a medical journal article. What we've done is go the teaching route. So we connect the dots. So we don't have any desire to do the research or to invent a pill or to invent a process that's a turnkey. But instead, what we do is do programs both at the college level for students and people who want to find out how the brain really works in plain English. Also, devise programs that can actually attract people to learning, whether it's an athletic club or a senior center or a hospital education group. In fact, we've done a year's worth of work with Legacy and Providence, two chains, competing chains in Portland. And each time we come in to give an annual update, whether it's Parkinson's or stroke survivors or diabetes, we change it from the diabetes support group or stroke group to the stroke education group. And by having people understand how the brain works, they can then try to go a little farther on their own challenges having to do with cognitive decline.
So when you talk about Providence, you're talking about Providence Health Group in Portland or Providence?
Exactly.
Okay.
No, Providence, the hospital chains, almost all, for the benefit of their members, want to have them educated as to what to do to lower their risks. And so they bring me in to give lectures that are really condensed versions of some of our college courses. And once we go back several times over a period of years, it's an update, because someone who went 1 year will tell a friend who has the same or similar challenge, you should have been there. So it's a snowball effect that really works efficiently.
Yeah, no, I am familiar with that because my nephew's wife is CEO of several of those Providence hospitals in Portland. But what I'd like to do, do you know Harvey Austin? He's in Connecticut.
No.
And he's
No, I haven't.
He is a physician. He's written a book called Elders Rock, and he's somebody It'd be nice to bring you together with him because I think you're on the same planet.
Well, the thing that we found out when we started this in the early 2000s and then really got going as a consultant for AARP in DC was that if someone is coming to a lecture about the brain, they used to come only out of fear. They were so afraid because there's no pill. But once you educate someone what the science is doing, especially in Europe, the studies that are coming in that are non-pharmaceutical interventions, the message that I'm sure Harvey in Connecticut and others are realizing is that if the pill doesn't get here in time, we're not going to wait. We're going to do what we can. And once the studies came out in Sweden in 2014 showing that you can, with lifestyle changes that are sustainable, you can prevent the symptoms from manifesting, the entire dynamics change. And we always like to say, and I think a lot of people are catching the phrase, you can't outsource your brain's future. You have to do it. You have to actually do the things that it takes. But doing them isn't like it's a Herculean effort. It's a little bit every day and learning to change those change those lifestyles just a little bit, but sustain it. So we educate on willpower and grit, the rest of the science. So connecting the dots is what we really are doing. While those scientists do their wonderful work in the trenches and in the silos, when they come in and announce a new breakthrough, we're able to connect a dot that they might not see. And that's why we think that people who are writing the books, as you mentioned, about brain health and brain science, those are the ones that are on the cutting edge.
Well, yeah, I think it's not only the brain. I mean, it's Louise Aronsen's book, Elderhood, which I'm sure you've read.
Yes.
Goes there and really picks up where Atul Gawande was and takes it to the next level. If we could broaden that, I think that could be of great interest as a program that doesn't necessarily involve volunteers, because you can give lectures on Zoom and that can be made available to villages across the country.
And I was just going to segue into that. It's a good opportunity. Thanks, Roger, for the comments. And we'll go back to the mentor part of it, but I think it's a conversation I think we should have as far as a webinar in the near future, and introduce, you know, some of these areas. I think you'd find a host of villages who would jump on and want to know more on how to implement it within their village. So.
Yeah, and let me throw one thing that we're doing with an experiment, and that's to see whether Zoom, which we use at the college now, and that we are using to cost effectively help market an emerging village by having us come in and give a live lecture, but they don't have the travel cost, they don't have the burden of and then we're also showing them how to record that, so that somebody who hears it and says you should have been there, and we put the village logos on it, and we really make sure that that's part of the process of building that knowledge base of what is the village. It's an outreach to the community that's very cost effective. Right, absolutely. Ooh, good idea. We do that all the time with Zoom. Yep. So, yeah, oh, that's good. Terrific. So with our few minutes left, I wanted to see if there were any other questions and then talk about the Village to Village Network mentor program that we have in place. But before I do that, any other questions as far as hiccups along the way? I know you had some good questions as far as marketing and trying to get you guys to expand, you know, in your community. The one thing I tell people all the time is don't hesitate to ask. I mean, if you don't ask, you won't know. And so I've heard people say, well, I went to the AAAs, but they really weren't receptive. Well, go back to them again and go to your local AARP, go to your local hospitals or physician offices and say, you know, that's a good segue into the medical community is, you know, we're bringing your patients to you and taking them home and getting them groceries and giving them socialization and stimulating them. So don't hesitate to not look in your community what's there. And, you know, a lot of organizations feel that they are competing, and we're not competing with existing organizations. We're there to supplement them, enhance the existing programs. And so having those conversations with, you know, the senior centers and with the Area Agency on Aging or the Council on Aging. And don't forget, like I said, the AARP is a good, the state, you know, every AARP state director is different agency, but, you know, they do have good outreach. They have great social media presence in a lot of the communities. And so they're more than willing to tag on. We have local politicians that have daily newsletters or weekly newsletters, and, you know, get a blurb in one of those and, you know, get them in your corner. So any other questions before I tell you about the mentor program? No?
Just one little one, Barbara.
Sure.
How do you, we realize that we're not competing, but how do you get the senior centers to realize you're not competing with them?
Well, you know, and I can only tell you from my background, most of the senior centers don't want people soliciting them. So when you have another nonprofit coming in, you're not looking to sell something. You're there to enhance their programs. And so convincing them that you're there to promote their mission by bringing other folks that they may not necessarily, you know, have had before. And it is connecting. You know, many of the local jurisdictions don't have the transportation in place to bring people to the senior centers. So having volunteers to take somebody to a program and And, that has been a success. But again, it's telling them we're not recreating the wheel. We're trying to bring more people, or like I said, we would bring programs to them. We're not there to solicit, a lot of these home health agencies, they love to come and, they'll knock on a village door and they'll say, we want to present, a lecture on falls, and they've got their logos and all their paraphernalia and their literature, and, they're there to sell their product. They're not there to teach somebody how to get up from a fall. That's the reality. And so, I think senior centers, you just have to cultivate them just like anybody else. It's a cultivation of trust and working in the community.
How do you handle the liability challenge? The senior center's worried that if they sponsor a volunteer-led driving program, that they get a liability if there are accidents or anything of that sort. So they don't want to get involved with it because of the liability question.
Well, get ARP to host it and fund it. They have driving programs that they do all the time, and they're insured. So again, or go to the local DMV and see if they do something through the county. There's no reason that the senior center should feel that they have a liability issue. So.
How does the village avoid the liability?
As far as bringing a program?
Well, let's say that a volunteer drives a frail person to the doctor, and the person is getting out of the car and slips, and the volunteer tries to catch them, and they both go down and they're both injured. Does the village have liability?
Most villages do carry insurance, an umbrella policy. Every state is different. You're getting into a slippery slope talking about insurance, which is a whole other hour we could spend on liability, general liability insurance. But, in the state of California, the insurance, follows the car. So if a volunteer is, driving, it's under their insurance. Every state is different. Many villages take umbrella policies, but also you have to look very wisely at how you set up your village. One, villages are not equipped to do non-ambulatory transportation. They are not equipped to handle frail people. If somebody's that frail, they need a companion to go with them. Villages are not insured. My village would not let a volunteer take a member, even if it was just for a broken leg or an ankle, push a wheelchair. It's a no-no. People have to be able to physically get in and out of a car on their own. So, I'm sure there's stories out there. Where's the volunteer? I had a volunteer who took somebody to the grocery store a couple of years ago. He loved doing the grocery runs, and he had a gal he loved. He would go into the grocery store with her, and she would go up and down the aisle to do her grocery shop at a grocery store. And he felt it was like on his watch, but it wasn't. But he did the due diligence. The store came in. It's really on the store's, issue. People ask about inclement weather. You have to be proactive about inclement weather. If it's a nasty hurricane day, you're calling the member up and saying, you need to reschedule your appointment, or we're going to make it for another day. Or if it's, weather related. If it's a flu season, we don't let volunteers. You don't let volunteers take somebody. I love the member that calls and says, yeah, I've got the flu. Can one of the volunteers take me to the doctors? No! Your family member.
Could be Ebola.
It's setting yourself up not to fail. And putting it in writing in a membership directory is the best thing I can tell you, and outlining what the volunteers' responsibilities are and what the members' responsibilities are, and laying out the guidelines of what you can do and what you can't do. And accidents are going to happen. There's going to be a time that maybe somebody falls, and a volunteer is right there. there is insurance for, like I said, the umbrella policy, but 9 times out of 10, it's, the member had fallen on their own. I've never heard of a volunteer catching somebody and falling, getting hurt also, but I'm sure that's happened. And then you go back on the Good Samaritan rule too. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can have on your side as far as volunteers. But looking at general liability and umbrella policies is the best.
That's very helpful. You've given us more than I expected. For a simple question, that was we talked to a senior center, and that was their reason for declining.
Well, I'm a former assisted living administrator, so I ran an assisted living community, 240 bed facility, and I was on the board of our village, and they really picked my brain about transportation and how to set it up. And a lot of the language that villages use are medical terms, that they, have to be able to get in and out of the car. They can't be a one-person assist, which is you're actually physically helping them in. They have to be able to physically get in and out of a car on their own. That doesn't mean they don't walk with a walker. That's fine. But they're able to get in and out of a car is the key thing. Last but not least, our mentor program. It's, we have come a long way. We have a lot of villages that are out there to support new and, developing villages. They have a lot of, somebody mentioned Dick Elkin. He's, the grandfather of all the technical, database stuff. A lot of knowledge on rural villages and all volunteer. But there are other villages out there that are happy to help. On our website, our mentor program is headed by Carol Paquette. And so all you have to do is look at our website and you can contact her. And she'll partner you up with somebody who, a specific need. And like Jack, you just mentioned insurance. If somebody called Carol and said, or emailed Carol and said, I want to know a little bit more about this area, she will partner you up. The mentor program's not there to help you from the day you start till 2 years later. They're there to help specific areas. And the village documents, of course, great. We're in the process of updating our toolkit to be a little bit more user friendly. Once I get over this conference, I'll be all set. But we have a lot of great things within our website to help support the villages developing and new open villages that are hitting a bump in the road. I mean, we help villages that are 5 and 10 years old with leadership transitions. That's a big thing right now, where villages have had their board of directors for over 5 years and they're starting to turn over and they need younger folks, or do they look outside the community? So there's a lot of not just developing mentor tools, but existing villages that have other issues as they go along. So, well, any other questions, concerns?
Very helpful information.
Thank you.
Well, is anybody going to the conference on the call? No.
A little too pricey for me.
It's just down this year.
Just the idea of flying somewhere to just listen to presentations for a few days is demanding.
Well, this is my 10th conference that I've attended. And I have to say that every conference I walked away with just incredible something to help me further my own village or look at something differently. And so it's not just the speeches, it's the networking and the viability of more outreach for your own village.
No, I agree. I went last year, you were in San Diego, so here we are in Carlsbad. So I
Yeah, but
was,
we got to share the wealth. Next year it's on the East Coast to us, so I guess you're not
this
coming to
year,
that, Jack.
no, I know. This
Barbara,
year,
you said you mentioned we could email you for the one pager.
Yeah. Do you want one?
Yes, please.
Okay, I will send you. I'll have Travis send you one. He's updating it as we speak, so I will have him send it to you, Carolyn.
Okay, I was
Thank
going
you,
to say,
Barbara.
this year leading
Barbara,
age.
Jerry?
I was going to say, you talked about Carol. Carol Paquette helped us a great deal. She got us a great mentor. And so I am one that really talks up your mentor program. It works.
Thank you. I will tell Carol. She does work very hard. She just finished doing a lot of our, we had renewal of our trademark and copyright stuff. So she's been really busy working on that for us. Great board member. So, all right. Well, enjoy the week.
Okay, enjoy the conference.
We will. We will.
Okay. See you
All right.
next year.
Thank
Bye.
you. All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.